to have a fixed age of consent, I think is wrong.
Okay.
No, let me just please explain to you why. Because some girls today are not ready at 16.
Exactly. Sure.
Some girls today are not ready at 18.
Yeah.
Some girls are not ready at the age of 21.
Mentally.
Quite frankly.
Yeah.
Doctor Imran, because you're a doctor, I think you might actually put some more medicine. He's a doctor of medicine. Yeah. Do you want to see the certificate,
No.
Steve? Okay. I'm glad you accept that. Yeah. So what the brother is saying here, first of all, he's saying that the physiology of a child in 7th century Arabia is identical to the physiology of modern women in the 21st century. That's the first claim he's making. The second claim he made was that biologically, i.e. the hips, are not ready to accommodate childbirth. I said, what if a girl develops early and her skeletal, structure actually is of a much older girl, for example, 15 or whatever? Could you possibly elaborate?
Why are we talking about? Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. So this is just a quick summary of the interesting conversation we just had. Really, it's a conversation about the age of Aisha radiallahu anha. And this is often something that's put forward or brought up by people who want to try and denigrate the character of the Prophet, peace upon him, to make him look dubious in his character. Of course, we went through that whole narrative of the event, and it clearly is not the case that the Prophet was in any way dubious at all. And we mentioned the criteria, which is not an age. So people who bring up an age are doing a disservice in this discussion. The criteria is physical maturity and societal readiness, which includes emotional, psychological and cognitive readiness, as determined by the society and the parents.
No, but the thing is, that's not really an assessment of whether she's psychologically ready. That's just them saying, we think she's ready. And we know there are plenty of bad parents who make bad calls on their kids all the time. Right now, there are parents who tell their children that they're boys when they're girls, and there are girls that are... Do you honestly think that we can really 100% trust parents to be that responsible for things like that?
First of all, there are no 100% in anything.
No. Even I'm willing to accept 80 to 75 to 80%.
We have a situation. How can we ascertain the readiness of marriage? And there are only a certain number of ways in which one can reasonably do that. One would be leave it up to the girl. So in our country, in England, girls as young as 11, 12, 9, 10 even, end up having sex.
No, but we don't leave it up to the girl. That's illegal.
I'm just saying.
But it's still illegal.
Of course it's illegal, but we know the practicalities of life. Many children under 16...
it still says...
Well, did you know that your child can get contraception from its school without your consent? Even if 11? Even under 16?
No, under 16 perhaps, but what I mean is...
So what is the law?
Nevertheless, it's still illegal.
The law is 16.
But it's still illegal.
I know, but the authorities...
make it illegal.
The authorities are collaborating with, are excusing...
Maybe with 15, 16-year-olds...
14-year-olds, 13-year-olds...
Those ages, there's like ambiguity.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the law is clear. It's illegal.
What I'm trying to...
There's a stop.
There is a letter of the law, and there is the spirit of the law. Okay. The letter of the law is 16.
Exactly.
The spirit of the law clearly is not 16.
So are you saying that in Islam there is a similar sort of scenario?
So what I'm trying to explain to you is that even in modern times today,
sure,
there are ambiguities. Sure. There are no certainties.
But it's really there are no certainties. 14 to 16 is the ambiguity, not 9 to 16.
So what if she's late 13?
Still,
you think they're going to refuse her contraception?
But that's, again, what I'm saying is you're now dealing with the outliers, whilst I'm dealing with 9-year-olds and 6-year-olds.
I'm asking you the question.
There is no ambiguity there.
But I'm asking you the question. Well, there is no ambiguity today in the 21st century. Was there ambiguity in the 7th century?
That is exactly my question, is that if the Muslims or Allah is there like hadiths or surahs that God gave, because you must agree at least on this one basis, Allah knows the human biology better than any other creature in the universe.
Of course.
So Allah would wouldn't it give guidance steps to
There are guidances.
do these steps
In fact,
in order to
in fact, those guidances didn't exist anywhere else.
Okay,
but they
so
existed in
where
Islam.
are the guidance? That's exactly what I'm
so
asking.
we have
the guidance.
So we have the guidance.
surahs,
We have the guidance that the girl has to have should be ready for marriage.
Okay.
Marriage should be consummated once she's pubescent, so she's reached the age of puberty. These are minimum times, by the way.
Sure.
These are not. She should.
No, but these are
below that she can't. Now, when we talk about ambiguity or confusion, we look at even Europe, from where I don't know if you're from Europe yourself, but
No, I'm not. But,
okay.
all right.
if we look
But
at
yeah.
societies in Europe, that ambiguity led to girls getting married at 6 years old in England,
Sure, yeah.
8 years old, 7-year-old.
But these are not gods; these are people.
But I'm giving you where ambiguities lead to.
I know, but you're comparing apples with cameras.
No, but just give me a chance.
Human beings versus God.
I understand. I'm not comparing them.
Okay.
What I'm saying to you is that in the Western Hemisphere, and in fact not just the West, I want to just single out the West.
The whole world.
The whole world. There was no rulings per se when it came to when a person can get married. Below which age she shouldn't get married. Islam introduced the nuances there. Now, you said to me, but how can we be certain that she is ready? Psychologically, mentally, physically, everything
I'm only
else.
interested in the psychological
Right, okay.
because the physical is much more easier to determine.
Who better to judge that scenario, that situation, than her primary carer, the one who loves her, looked after her, the mother that gave birth to her, that nurtured her? Who better to know that child better than anybody else? It would be the parents, right?
But that's not a step of analysis.
Let me just come to the. Now, what's the alternative?
Psychological evaluation.
By whom?
By people who actually have steps and tests in which they can.
Okay,
No, but it's nothing to do with that. Like a God
hold
would
on a
have
second.
sent all of that.
No, but hold on a second. Okay, so basically you're saying psychological analysis.
Yeah.
Right. Would that psychological analysis change depending upon the upbringing of that child?
I don't know because again, I don't ever assume a 6-year-old in Africa.
Think about that carefully.
No, but a
what I've said to
6-year-old
you.
in Africa
Forget 6 or 9 or
doesn't
10.
have a different psychological makeup to a 6-year-old in Europe.
Forget 6, 9, 10, 11. Just
but
go by the principle.
Yeah.
The principle of evaluation. I'm asking you a very basic question in terms of evaluation. Would the evaluation change depending upon the circumstances?
Depending on the age, possibly.
The upbringing.
Not necessarily upbringing.
Okay, I'll tell you
Given
why.
certain age
I'll tell you why the upbringing. Because if you've been geared in a society that at 6 or 7-year-old you're now a shepherd, you're working full time, there are no schools, there are no colleges, your life expectancy is in the low to mid 20s. Cultural sensibilities are different. Okay, the readiness or the getting the child ready for marriage is much earlier than it is today.
Not even in those societies there were 9 and 6-year-olds getting married.
How do you know that?
Because we have historical evidence of people. Even 9 and 6-year-olds were the least or the minimal, the outliers. Those were not the common practice.
Are you saying to me
Europeans,
for a 9-year-old,
Chinese, Persians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Byzantines? No, these were not practices widely.
When was the law changed in this country to raise the age of consent, which was 6 years old, 7 years old? Tell me.
I don't know. It was like 18th maybe century or
so
something.
Just in the last 150 years.
It wasn't common practice. So even in the Arabians, people say that this wasn't a common event.
Whether it's a common practice or it's not a common practice is irrelevant. Okay. What's relevant is, was there a legal framework established to establish a certain age, a certain criterion before which marriage was forbidden, not allowed? What I'm trying to explain to you is that throughout human history, throughout different geographical locations, that has changed. Now, the point here is this. There's a fallacy called presentism.
Of course, yeah.
Presentism is looking at a particular ruling or incident and applying that retrospectively with those spectacles and judging something to be improper.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the reason why it's known as a fallacy is because social sciences says that you can't do that. The reason why you can't do that is because if, for example, you lived in the 7th century, something that you find perhaps wrong or bad today may be perfectly acceptable to you back then.
Easy example, slavery.
Now, why would that be accepted to you? Because if you take the educational system, the psychological, social aspects, if you take the life expectancy, if all of those things were different, your judgment as a father would have also been different, as would have mine been. Now, as a Muslim, would I get my daughter married today at 9 years old? No. Why not? Because Islam tells me that all of these factors, including cultural sensibilities of that time, have to be taken into consideration. And so what Islam did is it prohibited an age below puberty, but it did not instruct at what age, because that age could vary depending upon the situational needs of that community.
Sir, one question, beautiful point you said. If something is you take in the past and you apply it today because the context of the society is different,
completely different.
Absolutely right. Would that same thing apply? Something in the past which was perfectly all right is absolutely not all right today. Would you accept that fact?
Some things like that can happen, yes, indeed.
Right.
No, but let me elaborate on that, because that's due to circumstances changing. So, for example, there may have been certain, because in Islam, the religion of Islam is to use your hikmah. Hikmah means reasoning, and it goes beyond that. Is the outcome of what you're doing going to create a favorable? Is the act going to create a favorable outcome? So something that might be halal, permissible, allowed, there may come a time when acting upon that may result, because of societal changes, may result in some harm happening maybe. So despite it being lawful and halal to do, it may be undesirable to do because the social dynamics, the way things are operating may be very different, so the needs may change. But that does not apply to the fundamentals of Islam. So for example, we have to pray, we have to fast, we have to give zakat, charity, so we have to fast, we have to do all of these things. We have to go hajj at least once in our life. Those are core foundational pillars of belief of Islam. And then there are many aspects to Islamic rulings that are highly dependent upon the social dynamics and needs of society.
Sir, in that case, we are in a society where today, in this context, if multiple gods exist, okay, in this context, in this society, if you want to embrace your neighbors, you need to accept that other gods. In that case, is it a fallacy according to Islam, or it's totally fine?
Because those are fundamentals, like I just explained to you.
Tell me that. What
and
is
the first fundamental is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah.
So it breaks the rule.
No. What I said to you, I clarified that. I said there are some core foundational beliefs that are not open to...
Your core foundational belief is creating a conflict with
You asked me a question.
He had doubts. I don't want you to just hijack the problem.
You asked me a question, right? You asked me a question, right?
Don't hijack the problem.
Should I respect and accept somebody who worships multiple gods, right? Islam has certain core tenets. that are not open to discussion, and there is no compromise there. And the first one is La ilaha illallah. There is nothing worthy, no deity worthy of worship except Allah, the God of Abraham, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of the Vedas. You're Hindu, right?
I don't believe in God.
Okay, so in the Vedas, in the most sacred Hindu scriptures, there is no likeness of God, there is no plurality. God is one, God is absolute, God is only. Islam is actually confirming what was revealed to the people before, including the Hindus, that God is one, and those are core tenets. They're not open for discussion. But Islam has a very beautiful concept where people can have a difference of opinion on certain matters based upon cultural needs and sensibilities, because those are not core tenets. You see my point?
So may I just get back to my original question, because I don't think there was really any answer to that.
Okay.
It was just like cultural explanations about the culture at the time. And I totally agree with you that a lot of people, especially in this park, judge 7th century people by the standards of 21st century, which is a total fallacy. But my original question was, are there hadiths or surahs that lay out actual steps that assess and evaluate mental cognitive ability?
So all of the things that I mentioned to you are in hadith.
I know, but those are not mental cognitive analysis. They are just simply, you simply said to me that parents know best.
The problem,
that was your real summed up conclusion.
I think the problem that you're struggling with is you're looking at a psychological analysis of how we would analyze it today, and you're saying that there should be some equivalence to that in the 7th century. And what I'm trying to explain to you is that to have a fixed age of consent, I think is wrong.
Okay.
No, let me just please explain to you why. Because some girls today are not ready at 16.
Exactly. Sure.
Some girls today are not ready at 18.
Yeah.
Some girls are not ready at the age of 21.
Mentally.
Quite frankly.
Yeah.
And what Islam would do is the parent would say, my love, you know, you have special needs and you have certain problems and you have certain things. I don't think you're really ready, even at 19 or 18, to be getting married. You need to just wait a little bit longer. We need to help you through that process. However, if she is ready, and as Muslims, we have to respect the law of the land. So we're living in England, and in England, the minimum age of marriage is, I think, 16 or 18. 16, I think, with consent of parents, and 18 she can do what she wants. So we would have to respect the law of the land. But at 16, I could say to my daughter, Beta, you know what? I think you're not ready. I'd like you to wait a little bit longer because of these reasons, these issues. Yeah. Now, is that going to be? Am I going to send her to a psychologist to get that analysis done?
Well, the thing is, to be honest with you,
you're not.
No, because
and in fact, most parents, even today, are not going to do that.
Yeah, but it's not that. That's not the point. The point is that, for example, in this modern era, now we've come to another age where there's other things where parents can consent to, which I'm sure you would not find desirable. A parent can say that my boy at the age of 10 can have puberty blockers, can have genital surgery and become a woman, but before he is 13 and become a female at 13 or whatever. Do you think that those parents have the right to make those decisions for those children?
Well, unfortunately, we live in an era where the parents are not making those decisions. Those decisions are being made for them by society.
A lot of parents are actually saying by society. No, but that's the thing. I'm taking the same standards, cultural, societal, and parental consent of a scenario in which a parent can choose a permanent act for their child.
But I can't speak.
And can you honestly say that is wrong?
No, but I can't speak for non-Muslims, can I?
No, but can you say that is fundamentally right or wrong? Well, can you on principle say that is right or wrong?
How does one judge right or wrong?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay. Can you, on your principles and based on your Islamic even principles, based on the age of marriage and the criteria that is involved in that, can you actually say that I can say that my child at 6 is ready to give consent for marriage, but an English parent can't can't say that their child at the age of 6 is allowed to give consent to become a female if they're a male.
But again, you're conflating issues here.
It's not conflating, but these are standards.
I'll explain to you why.
We were setting standards and criteria.
I'll explain to you why. Sure. Okay. First of all, in this country, if your child identifies as another gender, it's actually a form of like child abuse.
But others would say having your child marry a 50-year-old man is also child abuse.
Let me just.
It's actually direct child abuse.
You see, if you ask a question, at least hear the answer.
Sure.
Don't make up your mind before you've entered the discussion.
I think you already have.
I'm already skipping.
Because if you do that, brother, you see, if you do that, it's not going to be a fruitful discussion.
Sure. Sorry,
okay?
go on.
So the fact is, I can't judge non-Muslims and non-Muslim societies who have gone down this, I think, destructive path of ultra-liberalism, which I think is destroying families, destroying societies, okay? I can't judge those people with the light of Islam in the sense that pass judgment on them, because they're not Muslims. Now, Islam would say that you're not permitted to do this and encourage this and support this. You have to give that person an ability to get to a certain age. Then what they do is they're responsible for their own actions. But before that age, they're under the influence or control or guardianship of the parents. Now, if you say to me, some people might argue that a 50-year-old man marrying a 9-year-old girl is child abuse. The first question I would ask is when? In the 21st century or in the 7th century?
I consider it child abuse at all times.
Hold on a second.
Because human biology hasn't changed for millions of years.
So let me ask you today, why would it be child abuse today? By the way, I agree with you. Why would it be child abuse today?
Well, because a 9-year-old's physiology hasn't even developed enough.
Physiology?
The hips haven't even widened enough. Usually they die at childbirth.
Physiology? What else?
Psychology, we know that the human brain isn't developed until well into their 20s.
Psychology, what else?
Well, I mean, socially, of course. And
socially, yeah. And I suppose we live a lot longer today. 70,
technology
80,
has allowed us to live longer, so we don't need to have babies so early.
Right?
Sure. Average life expectancy is like 80 years.
We're not living in perpetual war where
famine, war,
people are
pestilence.
Dying very, very young.
Although we have had a bit of a pestilence.
Okay, so because of all of these factors, you are now saying that it potentially child abuse. That child is not ready for marriage. Okay, I agree with you.
But I also think that could apply in the 7th century.
Now, the question is, does it apply to the 7th century?
Well, the biological absolutely does.
Okay.
Psychological, the human brain hasn't developed sooner in the 7th century than in the 20th century.
So what you're saying now,
the brain still develops at the same rate. The hips still widen at the same rate.
So what you're saying is that the biology of a 9-year-old in the 7th century is identical to that of the 21st century.
Practically.
Can you prove that and establish that for me?
Yeah, we have fossils, we have bones, we have people who we know human biology. We can go back to literally thousands of years, if not tens of thousands of years, and measure female hip sizes to male hip sizes.
If a 9-year-old has the hip sizes,
no, we're talking about
hold on a second.
No, I said the physiology.
So if the 9-year-old has
this is all biology.
If a 9-year-old has the hip size of a 15-year-old, is it okay then?
If a 9-year-old has a hip width of a 15-year-old, the thing is, biologically, she would not die in childbirth, but I think then socially, I would say it's still unacceptable.
So socially.
But what I mean is,
socially.
Once you solve but again, you're talking about outliers or potential maybes, because there has been a 5-year-old who's had a child. Yes. A 5-year-old has got pregnant in South America and had a child and survived.
Right.
So outliers exist, but do we want to encourage a society that will impregnate 5-year-olds?
That's a separate issue.
But
listen.
That is
you raised an important point, which is biological readiness.
Yeah.
Now, I've asked you if the biological readiness is ready at 9-10 years old, and she wants to get married, she wants to have children in the 7th century. Yeah. What is your contention to that?
My contention is we don't make laws based on outliers and exceptions. We make laws based on what is the most common event, and the most common event of a biological 9-year-old is that they cannot pass children through the birth canal,
they will die. You know what I think is better than what you're saying? have a law that accommodates everybody.
No.
Not just a law that accommodates certain women, certain girls. So, for example, if a girl living in the 7th century, physically, emotionally, and she's ready, and she wants to partake in sexual relations, she wants to have children, she wants to get married, according to you, she should be forced not to get married.
Yeah.
Right? Forced.
We force people all the time.
Despite being ready.
We still force people
Despite being
all
ready.
the time.
You know what the result of that is?
That she has to wait longer till she gets married.
And what do societies generally do when they have to wait? Do they wait?
Well, no. I mean, you can say that yes, there are people who will then again go out and fornicate and they will do other things.
Exactly.
But the fact is that we don't change our laws
Right.
of the country that applies to the vast majority of everyone based on outliers.
So what we do?
Again, you're saying to me that I have to make a law based on outliers, not on based on the
misrepresenting what I
majority.
said.
No, because that's what you
The
said.
law is not for outliers.
No, you're saying accommodate outliers.
The law accommodates the needs of everyone, including the outliers.
But that's
I would say that is more just.
No, that is a bad law.
I would say that is fairer.
No, that is a terrible law.
Now, one of the things. Well, look, when you say something is terrible, it can't be just because it doesn't feel right to me.
No, it's not that it doesn't feel right. I can give you an equivalence
There has to
that you would
be
disagree
no.
with.
But hold on a second. There has to be some logic and reason behind your finding something reprehensible or wrong.
Yeah,
okay.
and I can
and if you say biology, and then I explain to you that first of all you claim that girls were exactly the same in the 7th century as they are in the 21st century, that would have to be established. That's the first thing.
They're still on.
Secondly, if the biology is about hip sizes and giving birth, then I explain to you that what about the outliers, a girl that develops very quickly?
Again, we don't make laws based on outliers.
Okay.
We make laws based on the most common event and occurrence.
The reason
you
why
are trying to make an outlier to be the focal point of creating laws within a society.
You're doing the exact opposite. What you're doing actually is saying that we're not going to accommodate the outliers.
No.
We don't care about the outliers.
We don't.
All we care about is what makes us feel good.
No, we care about what creates a better, harmonious and less sexually perverse society.
Let's make it a perverse. Okay, let's cut the chaff. Let's get to the meat, the bones of the argument. What age of consent should it be in the 7th century?
In the 7th century, I personally think that there was a lot of different countries who established different ages. I still disagree with the lower end of like 10 years old. I think every age, from what I understand, if I want to superimpose my ideas of the 21st century, 18 is absolutely across the board.
Okay.
And that is what the world is adopting right now.
Even in the 7th century.
Whichever age, the human biology hasn't changed between 1,500 years ago to now.
You're making argument.
1,500 years ago,
actually the doctor,
human biology has barely changed.
I'll ask the doctor about the readiness. But we know, for example, that girls reach the age of puberty in hot climates faster than in cold climates.
It doesn't matter.
So we know that
their hips doesn't widen faster. Okay. Their brains doesn't develop quicker.
But you see, this is the problem that you have, because your argument is just going back, ignoring everything I've said to you.
I understand the social aspect.
But
I understand the parental consent aspect.
You see, you're saying 18 across the board, right?
I think absolutely.
Okay. What was the life expectancy in medieval Arabia? What was the life expectancy
connected with?
Yeah, but what's the
I'm asking you a question. What was the life expectancy
in puberty?
But life expectancy at the other end.
What was the life expectancy
in
Arabia?
Maybe 40 years old, 30 years old.
Much younger, in fact.
Maybe even 20.
Much younger.
Bringing up life
So
expectancy.
that was one of the reasons why people married early. Because before your child would have been 7 or 8 years old, the chances were, if you got any type of infection, urinary infection or whatever, you would have been dead.
It still doesn't matter.
There's no antibiotics.
It makes no difference.
There's no cures.
It doesn't make any difference to child readiness for reproduction.
Doctor, Imran, because you're a doctor, I think you might actually put some more medicine. He's a doctor of medicine. Yeah. You want to see the certificate, Steve? Okay. I'm glad you accept that. Yeah. So what the brother is saying here, first of all, he's saying that the physiology of a child in 7th century Arabia is identical to the physiology of modern women in the 21st century. That's the first claim he's making. The second claim he made was that biologically, i.e. the hips are not ready to accommodate childbirth. I said, what if a girl develops early and her skeletal, structure actually is of a much older girl, for example, 15 or whatever. Could you possibly elaborate?
Why are we talking about?
We're talking about essentially age of marriage and why at 9 years old or 6 years. Well, I mean, my initial contention was that 6-year-olds can't cognitively give any consent of any sort, especially when it comes to life-affirming decisions like marriage. In this day and age, we've got things like sex change operations, so on and so forth. I don't think children can consent to any of those sort of scenarios. But what we moved on to was that in the 7th century, what would be the appropriate age of consent for a person in the 7th century, especially a girl?
So the flaw is in the question. So the how was marriage established is not an age.
Okay.
That's
but what is the appropriate age of reproduction?
So again, you have to take the age out of the question because that's what everyone focuses on, and they lose the big picture.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do with age. The age is the problem. I understand this because we're looking back and we're thinking, 6, 9. But the question is, was the criteria for marriage an age? That's the question. And the answer to that is no.
No, they didn't.
It was never an age. Has the criteria for marriage, because now most Muslim countries, most countries will say 18. A lot of the scholars will say 18.
Even Saudi Arabia recently
Now,
changed
the
it.
question is, has the criteria for marriage changed? No. So now the question is, okay, what is the criteria?
Okay.
Do you understand that? That's the first
So
question.
you're saying to me that this is all based on an individual assessment. So each individual person who's going to get married, we have to assess them based on their capabilities at their time, their physical
So I haven't said anything.
development. Okay. In that case, then, please elaborate on what would you consider to be the criteria
He's just
of marriage?
preempting what you're going to say.
Yeah, I presume that, but I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
So
Okay,
let's understand.
please explain.
Let's understand the narrative first. Okay. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, his first wife was Khadija radhiyallahu anha. She was 15 years his senior. He was
Khadija?
Khadija radhiyallahu anha. 15 years his senior. He was 25. She was 14 when they married. May God be pleased with her. He was his only wife until she passed away. Then the only person he married who wasn't previously married after that was Aisha radhiyallahu anha. He married no other unmarried women after that.
Oh, as in the other marriages were
all of the other
husbands,
women,
the husbands
were all
died.
widows, divorced, etc. Okay, so that's really important. Why do I mention that? Because it establishes the individual character. Because some of the ideas behind this sort of questioning is this person of a dubious character who's taking advantage of his position to get young girls to be with him in a sexual way? Now, we can tell from the life of the Prophet upon him that is not the case. Because he could have carried on having young women, even prepubescent women, if he had wanted that. But it didn't happen. So first of all, it puts that question to bed. The question is now, how do we discuss this? How do we understand this? So Aisha radhiyallahu anha, she was, and now we're talking about, so we mentioned two questions. One is consent, and the other is, are they prepared for the marriage? Physically, emotionally, psychologically.
That's it. Those are the criteria that Islam provides.
So there's two criteria that are applied. One is biological readiness, and the other one is societal readiness. There are some verses in the Quran that talk about you allowing the orphan girls to become mature before you give them their inheritance, along these lines. And this is explaining that part of your ability to be a functioning adult within the society, what you need to have is what the society considers to be a societal maturity. The other important criteria is biology. If you have someone who is biologically unable to perform the functions of an adult, they would be a minor. And once they have the biological aspects to allow them to perform the functions of an adult, i.e. become pregnant, have children, etc., they would be considered biologically an adult, not socially, biologically. So you have to apply these two criteria together. So if you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when the marriage contract happens, and then there was a delay, and then there was the consummation, I agree with you that person is not able to, they're too young to be able to say yes or no. So in some countries, like if you went back to Pakistan, I'm from Pakistan originally, the parents can arrange a marriage, and then when it's time to consummate, the consent is taken when that person is ready, and then it's consummated. So this is a similar example. Now we would call that engagement, commitment or whatever you want to call that. You can call it that thing.
Betrothed.
Yeah, betrothed. So this happened. And then there was a waiting period. So betrothal happened at 6. So my question is, what are they waiting for?
Well, my original question when you were introduced was, physically, do women in the 7th century...
So that's a different question. So
I know, that was the original question when we brought you in.
I'll come to that.
Because we went to a whole other thing now.
I'll come to that.
Can we actually get to that?
But before we get to that, I want to explain the narrative.
Okay.
So what was the delay? Why were they waiting 3 years?
Well, I mean, presumably the general narrative is that they wanted to make sure she's physically ready.
No, because that's not the criteria.
That wasn't the criteria? So
we have the two criteria.
That was my answer.
So the first criteria is physical maturity.
Yes.
The second criteria is social maturity, societal maturity. So being able to function as an adult within the society. How is that determined? How do we determine?
Why is the criteria physical and social, not physical and cognitive?
We'll come to that. Because when we use the term social, there are subsections to that.
So the social is a subset of the cognitive is a subset of a social.
So when you're socially competent, that means you're cognitively competent, you're psychologically competent, you're emotionally competent to perform the functions of an adult. Now, how do we determine both of those two criteria, biological maturity and social maturity? How do we do that? Biological one's easy. You wait for puberty.
Well, even puberty doesn't really mean
it means that they're biologically mature. We'll come on to the reason. So, when can normal puberty? What is the range of this? Do you know the range?
No, I mean, you're the doctor. I defer to you.
So there's something called precocious puberty. This is early puberty that's abnormal. Anyone under 8 is considered to be precociously coming into puberty, and you would try to give them medication to delay their puberty and to extend it beyond that. Anyone from 9 onwards is considered normal puberty because that's the normal range, 9 to 14, 15. If people start to go beyond this, then we worry that they're having a delayed puberty. Now, and I'll give an example of this. If a child, a 9-year-old with a tummy pain, came into A&E and they'd already had their menses, they were gone through puberty, one of the tests that is done as a screening test is a pregnancy test. Why? Because there's a possibility in the list of diagnoses that they may be pregnant. So that's one criteria, physical maturity. Now, with physical maturity, what happens? There's a height growth, secondary sexual characteristics, hairs, enlargement of the breast, or for the men, enlargement of the testicles. You see all these things happening. So this is preceded by so normally you get your height quickly. So women have two surges of their height, one linked to puberty and one a bit later, and boys we tend to mature slightly later, and so we have different surges of height, but they happen a bit later, from 11 onwards, approximately. So that's one criteria. Now, how do we determine the societal maturity?
Before you move to the societal, I just want to stay with the physical. Does the explanation you just gave, does that apply to people in the 7th century as well as the 21st, or do they differ?
There's no difference.
So across the board, from 7th century to the 21st century, these hormonal patterns, these puberty patterns are exactly the same for all human beings.
Yeah, because we're human beings.
My original.
Are there factors?
My point to you was that a girl that is 9 years old or a girl that is 14 or 15 years old potentially could have the same physical attributes in terms of size and ability and capability of having a child.
So
that was my point. It doesn't change between 7th century and 21st century girls.
So let me help a little bit with this, because are there factors that can change the onset of puberty? Yes. Calorific intake. If you're eating a high calorific diet, you can come into puberty earlier. Heat. If you live in a hot climate, you tend to come into puberty earlier than if you live in a colder climate. So we tend to, in northern European countries, puberty is a bit more delayed compared to, say, sub-Saharan Africa, these sorts of places.
Australia, possibly.
Yeah. Now, in today's modern world, because of the advent of heating, etc., that you find everywhere, this is becoming a bit blurred.
Like air conditioning and different climate controls. So we've actually manipulated.
We always do. We're human beings. We don't let the environment control us. We control our environment. This is so we come out of the evolutionary pattern almost because we step out.
To some extent, we've escaped.
The second thing, how do we determine societal maturity? How do we determine that?
Okay, that could have myriads of different scenarios. Of course, people in the 7th century and 10th century and 21st century are going to have very different ideas.
How do we determine?
Well, that's socially acceptable behaviours, effectively.
Okay. So the society determines it. And for the individual, it would be the parents that determine it.
In the 7th century, certainly, yeah.
And even in our society, we have the same. So I've met 25-year-olds that I think they're probably not suitable. They're not ready for marriage. Because physically, everything's there. Mentally and emotionally, cognitively, they're not there.
It's just, I use that same criterion of the parent because I think the parent analysis is quite faulty. And I use that analogy by saying, right now, there are parents who consent to having their daughters change into boys and their sons change into girls. Just because parents decide that that's okay, I don't think that that's necessarily okay.
So if you go to Iowa in America, Iowa, there is a Christian community there, and the law within that state is that, if I remember correctly, Iowa, I think it is Iowa, that if you have parental consent, there is no age limit
there is no age limit at all.
So you over there, even today, I think they say, I think I saw the documentary, there are maybe 200, I won't give a number, I'm going to just guess, but there are large numbers of people
who've been married,
who are getting married at very young ages, boys and girls, to people who are much older than them. And this is occurring with consent within their society, and it's allowed by the state law. Because if you're under 16 or 18, you have to take this in front of the judge, and the judge will ask the question, does this person who wants to get married before 18 have parental consent or not? And then the parents will come forward and say, yes, we consent, and then this legally allowed to happen.
But do you agree that is problematic?
So we'll talk about that. So that is happening now in the USA today as we're standing here. If you look across societies in the past, what you will see is that the parents or the society, because society is really a conglomeration of families. The society decides what is appropriate for when someone is going to be married, and they would know when their particular child is going to get married. You understand? Or suitable for marriage. So what happened with the Prophet peace be upon him? Going back to the narrative, betrothal, they're all waiting. Puberty happened to start at this age for Aisha. It could have been 5 years later. It could have been 6 years later. Anything could have happened.
10 years.
There's no way to know. Until that time, there would be no consummation. It happened to happen at 9. So what happened? When the parents were happy that their child was now physically mature, they deemed that now our child is mentally
so they approached the Prophet and said,
this is the Prophet.
So the time was set by the parents, not by
the time was not set by the parents.
Sorry, as in the readiness, the date of
the
readiness.
determination of this person now ready to form their function.
That's what I mean.
Was determined by the parents. And then they approached the Prophet peace upon him, and then the marriage was consummated. Now for us in today's society, we've been conditioned to see people of age of 16, 17, 18 who are not yet ready for marriage. We find this difficult to deal with.
Sure. It's not only that. Sure. I think in modern society, the reason, especially a lot of people who are, you could say, anti-Islam, will use this is because this is a criteria set for all time, because Muslims make the claim of Muhammad as an example for all times, for all men. And so when you try to argue that this was a 7th century event that was exclusive for the 7th century, but what I mean is sometimes when people say that this was the 7th century social structure, etc., etc.,
that's not my argument.
That is going to make it kind of hard for people to accept.
I've said that the criteria hasn't changed. So the question is, what's happened now to us for the age of consent or age of marriage to rise? What's happened? Two things. One is if you think back to 7th century, no formal schooling system, from a very early age, you're doing what your parents do. So from the time you're walking, you're with your parents, they'll take you to where they're going, they'll do what you're doing, you're helping out with them. By the time you're 5, 6, 7, you're really functioning within the, you're in the fields, you're doing all the work, you're functioning. So even if you came to the UK 200 years ago, you'd see toddlers in the fields helping their elderly. So they become able to function as an adult within the society much earlier. What's happened now is we've delayed the mature, not the physical, no changes in the physical attributes. You can have a period of 9, you can have a period of 4, no problem. You can hit puberty any time. What we've done is we've delayed mental maturity and functioning within the society as an adult. How have we done that? Schooling. We've taken people out of society, we've put them into schools where they learn education, etc. But it prevents them from becoming fully functioning members of society at that time.
By getting into work, yeah.
And then the other thing that we've done is also we've brought in a lot of entertainment type things that have prevented us from becoming socialized
or even mature. There are 14-year-old men playing games all day, every day now.
So hold this for 1 second. So if you look at the physical criteria, it's remained the same. Our social maturity, the age is rising. So we have to wait until both of these things are ready. So over time, what's happened is that the age has risen. Now, has our criteria in Islam changed? No.
I get it, if I may.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to say to you, one thing I just wanted to say to you is that your name is Banksy, right?
They call me that.
Yeah. You said to Brother Jordan, because earlier you said to me, 18 is your criteria, below which is the child, yes?
I think so, yeah.
You said to Brother Jordan, Assalamu alaikum, that if it was legal to sleep with a 15-year-old, you would have no problem with that.
No, he made the inference that I would.
But he said that you would have no problem with
whether
that.
I would.
But you see, this is what I'm trying to say to you. One thing I'm very happy about is that we've had a cordial discussion.
It was lovely, yeah. It's meant to be.
I think what we shouldn't do is target like Brother Jordan or say things about his sister and things like that. I think that is deplorable.
The thing is,
no, brother.
That was
brother.
just
I'm just saying to you, brother.
But she was online.
No, but I think that's deplorable because, as an Islamic point of view, as a Muslim,
2018,
whatever it was, brother. But as a Muslim, I would never disrespect somebody's sister because they accepted Islam. Because Islam teaches me that have etiquette, manners, and decorum, and your women folk, you have to treat them with respect and dignity. So I think personally, I would hope, inshallah, that after this discussion, which was a very fruitful discussion, that you would at least offer Brother Jordan and his wife an apology.
Well, his sister,
I don't think this is a nice thing to do, really.
To be honest, if you actually saw what I did, you would recognize what it was. It was just taking a mockery of the fact that she was talking about something.
I know.
So I actually criticize what people say.
I know.
And I treat women and men exactly
all
the same.
I'm saying to you, brother, is this, that to say something knowing that we're going to possibly hurt somebody is not a good act that any one of us should do, whether Muslim or non-Muslim.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, sorry.
I think you made the point, really.
Yeah.
What I want to say is, even today, we don't agree on what the ages of marriage should be.
Sure.
18 in America, 16 here. They're thinking of 14 in France.
Well, no, it is
12 in Paraguay.
Yeah, I think in France it is 14, but it only as an exception for if someone is 16 or 18. It has to be within a few years of the person.
But it's there.
But yeah, it's not marriage.
12 in Paraguay. If you go to the Amazonian forest or even to sub-Saharan Africa, people will still be applying the criteria of puberty and societal readiness. So the point here is, it's the arrogance of taking your modern, secular, Western European concept of marriage age and saying this is the right way.
This is the criteria.
Well, this is extremely problematic.
This is the sort of, if you like, the realization I came to when I was talking to you and listening to what you were saying about the fact that Muhammad married Aisha at the age of 9. That even though Muslims say that Muhammad is the example for all mankind, technically, if you take the scenario that happened then and apply it to all time, then I think it would work in this sense. Muhammad didn't marry her because she was 9. Absolutely. He married her because her parents said that this was the right right time for her and she consented. And if we apply that to this day, then whenever the parents say that she is, whoever you marry, the parents say that she's ready to get married, then that age
was that the only criteria?
No. But what I mean is, if we're taking just the age, then that age, according to your scale of biological versus social, then that age would automatically increase because the parents would not consent at a lower age in this society than they would.
Sure, the parents were the barometer of the society.
Exactly.
So what that would mean is societal laws, norms.
So the parents would now have a much higher level.
This is it. So it's two criteria that are unchanged. And so for me, there's no moral ambiguity. And then when I look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and I see how he was throughout his life, the narrative that some people, not you, but some people try and present with this sort of questioning, it has no basis.
This is what I mean. I mean, like, again, when you put that scale of societal versus biological, and that increases, then taking the criterias of, I mean, I'm not convinced of the cognitive ability. I'll be honest, I don't think Muslims of the 7th century had any way of evaluating cognitive ability, but societal and biological criteria would have been enough to have elevated that age group based on what society accepts at the time. So perhaps he wouldn't have married her at 9 if the parents hadn't said, if it was a socially acceptable.
Or if she was not biologically ready.
Or if the societal norms were different. Or if, and societal norms take into consideration education, life expectancy, all of these things are going to influence. Now, the beautiful thing about Islam, sorry, I am interrupting, even though I did call you for the words of wisdom. The beautiful thing here about Islam is that you have a principle that Imran alluded to that was correct in the 7th century and still applies in the 21st century. It's timeless. And that wisdom comes from the Creator. That's not man-made, because man-made things. Because man-made things are often very time-related. They don't often transfer very easily throughout time. Societal changes and all of the things that we've discussed. But that's the wisdom of Islam. That it gives you a criteria that can be applied in the 7th century, and that same criteria can be applied in the 21st century. At one time, 9-year-old can be acceptable, and at another time, 16 or 18 might not be acceptable. That's the beauty.
May I? Now, I don't want to. This is not about Islam. This is about the people who follow Islam. Now, I know that we can clearly separate the two and say people who follow the Islam not necessarily follow Islam in the way that Islam is meant. And based on that understanding, why, or is there any way for the Muslim Ummah to correct? Because we know that there's a lot of child marriages that take place in Muslim majority nations. Is there a step, is there a road, is there a pathway that the Muslims can take with your understanding to try to correct those laws in those countries who clearly still are marrying 9-year-olds, where we know society, even on a global scale, has at least moved on from that age?
So let's
that's what I mean. This isn't an Islamic question. This is a political.
So what I'm going to say is, I don't agree with the characterization that the majority Muslim countries this happens a lot. I don't agree with that. Even if you went to someone like Pakistan, the age is like 18.
Afghanistan.
Sure, but what you're taking there's what, 59 Muslim countries. I'm just guessing the number. And you're taking one out of that.
Well,
do you understand? So what's happening? What happens is that we have an exception to the rule, and we're generalizing the negative to all of the Muslims.
No. I'm just giving my perception. Is there a road path?
And there's another point to be made here as well.
For people of your sort of mindset.
There's another point to be made
be
here as
able
well.
to elevate.
I'm going to say something controversial. Let me just say something controversial. I'm going to say something controversial. If there's a sub-Saharan African society, not Muslim, who are living as as they were 2,000 years ago, and in their society they're deeming that physical maturity and then functioning as an adult within their society, sufficient for them to allow marriages to happen. On what criteria are you going to go there and say to them that they're wrong?
Well, I mean, based on liberal principles, I'll be honest, they have no foundation for this, because liberal principles are, you live your life, I live my life, and I don't really care. Based on more conservative principles of a society has implications if they behave in a certain way in the globe as a whole, because we're becoming more of a global society. And if that is the case, then it is obligated upon more advanced societies to start to elevate those other societies, because their behavior ultimately will affect all of us. But if it doesn't affect us, there's a tribe in New Guinea, I think Papua New Guinea or somewhere, where they are totally isolated. In fact, they'll kill anyone that lands on their beach. Nobody cares about them. But I do care about a country such as Pakistan or Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, because they are advanced nations who have their behavior has implications.
Can I just make one point here? You know, first of all, you said Muslim majority countries. You go to the deep south in America, predominantly Christian parts of your civilized world that you want to refer to, they have marriage below 16.
And that is wrong.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is that you're saying basically that how it affects us, as if somehow there's some detrimental effect through Western societies. You know what the average age in England for girls who lose puberty is in this country?
You mean lose their virginity?
Yes, have sex.
Yeah, but you said puberty.
Have sex, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it could be 14, it could be 15. It could
Much
be...
younger than that, in fact.
Well, yeah.
So now here's the difference, you see. So Islam has a formula to solve that problem, which is that rather than her becoming a victim to predators, and let's face it, you're a man and I'm a man, and we know how men think. We know what men want. We know what men say to young girls when they're young boys to get what they want.
Well, if men say that to, if a grown man says that to a 12-year-old,
no.
he goes to jail.
Let's say a 13-year-old boy comes into puberty. What does he say to his 13-year-old girlfriend? Hold on a second. Look, now we have to live in the practicality of how life exists, not this fairy tale utopia that we wish we were in. He gives her sweet nothings. I love you, baby. I want you. I'm thinking about you. He's on the phone till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And what's he doing? Softening her up. And then they have sex. This is what happens in our societies in the Western world. So promiscuity, sexual contact is going on, regardless of what the society deemed to be reasonable or right. But in Islam, the way that that's legislated is the parents are involved, society is involved, maturity is asked, and within the sanctity of marriage, which gives her rights. So he can't just sow his seeds and then tell all his mates, I've just slept with, with Suzanne or whatever, okay, and then she becomes a notch on his bedpost to show off to his friends. That's what he thinks about her. That's the respect. No. But that's what happens in our society.
I totally disagree with your premise.
So in our society, women, young girls, end up having sex because they're not physically or mentally ready, and they're persuaded or pressured into having sex. But what Islam says is no. The parents should be involved. Society should be involved. This should be assessed. If a young man wants to have a relationship with your daughter, at least assess that he's going to look after her. If she becomes pregnant, if she has a child, that he will support. He will go out and work and support his family. And so the difference is this: underage sex, i.e. in terms of the Western perspective of 16 or 18, is still going on, regardless of whether it happens within the Islamic framework, which I believe is far superior, or the Western framework where she gets coerced into having many. Now you go and ask. This was a statistic. Young women. If you knew now what you knew then, would you have waited? You will find very few young women saying, you know what, when at 12 and 13 I started having sex, I'm actually happy that I did. Most of them will say, no, you know what, I wish I'd waited. So now what Islam does, Islam knows how the psychology of the man and the woman is. And so Islam makes a framework that accommodates that if somebody is going to get into a sexual relationship, they are protected. They don't just become a little notch on somebody's bedpost that they can show off to other people. Now, I would want that for your daughter, protection. And you would hopefully want that for everybody else's daughter.
I totally disagree with you on like so many levels.
No problem.
Unfortunately, this conversation will take us into another hour or two, and I have to go. But thank you for
You're welcome.
wonderful conversation.
But I hope that you do the honourable thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope you do the honourable thing, and you offer Brother Jordan and his sister an apology, because
within the context of the joke,
I emphatically
I don't apologize for the
and
joke.
passionately disagree with anyone, man or woman, who deliberately goes out to say things that are of a derogatory nature, of a nature of ridicule, where you upset somebody's feelings. And I love Brother Jordan very much, and I respect his sister. She's like my sister. So as I would be offended if you'd offended my own sister, I would ask you, I would ask you that I hope you do the right thing. I hope you do the right thing. If you like that video, click on that link on that video, and inshallah, I'm sure you'll enjoy it.